You've read Genesis your whole life, but have you noticed what's already broken? When God creates humans, the opening chapters feel seamless, linear, complete. Yet beneath the surface lies a question that changes everything. Did something catastrophic happen on Earth before Adam drew his first breath? This isn't about conspiracy theology or fringe interpretation. This is about reading what Genesis actually says. Most of us learned Genesis as a clean sequence. God creates light, sky, water, land, plants, animals, then humans. Evil arrives when the serpent shows up in Eden, right? But that's where the story becomes complicated. The serpent doesn't introduce evil to a pristine world. The serpent appears in a world that already has systems and hierarchies. Look at what precedes humanity's creation. God separates light from darkness on day one. He establishes boundaries between waters, sky, and land. He fills emptiness with order. Why does a perfect creation need to be separated from darkness? The Hebrew word for the formless chaos at the beginning is tohu vavohu, without form and void, not merely undeveloped, but disrupted, disordered, broken. If creation started from nothing, Moses could have simply said nothing. Instead, he describes something chaotic, requiring divine intervention. The waters of chaos recede light, separates from darkness. The firmament divides the waters. Each day, God imposes order over disorder. This language of combat appears elsewhere in Scripture. Job 38 describes Leviathan crushing sea monsters. Revelation speaks of war in heaven before Earth's foundation. What if Genesis opens mid-conflict? Think about the serpent's entrance in chapter 3. He doesn't explain evil to Eve. He questions God's character. He doesn't introduce temptation. He corrupts what already exists. Most critically, the serpent already holds rank among God's creatures, as described as craftier than all beasts. Craft requires experience, intelligence, a history. A being doesn't gain craftiness overnight. Cunning is cultivated through seasons of rebellion and fallen purpose. Consider the phrasing: the serpent was already there, not arriving to tempt humanity, but existing within order. The garden isn't his first ambition. Humanity is merely his next target. This reframes everything about Satan's fall. If Lucifer fell before Genesis 1:1, then Earth became contested territory. Revelation 12 describes war in heaven. Michael and his angels fight against the dragon. The dragon is cast out of heaven, having lost this war. When is this war? Traditional theology places Satan's fall somewhere in eternity past, before creation. But what if it happened during creation week? Genesis 1 shows God actively restoring order, not building from neutral materials, but imposing divine will against resistance. Each day things are separated, divided, commanded into place. This isn't gentle creation, it's sovereign reclamation. The second creation account in Genesis 2 shifts perspective. It's more intimate, focused on humanity's role. But notice Eden exists within a larger earth. The garden is planted in a world with regions and rivers. Humanity doesn't inherit a blank slate. They inherit a recovered paradise within a contested world. The presence of the serpent confirms this. If Satan's fall occurred after Genesis was finished, he inserted himself afterward. But if his rebellion happened during creation week, the serpent's presence is inevitable. He's not a surprise guest at the garden party. He's an ancient enemy watching humanity's arrival with calculated interest. This theological layer transforms how we read temptation. Eve doesn't encounter evil for the first time. Through serpent's words, she encounters a being who has spent ages perfecting rebellion. He understands divine character intimately. The fall of man wasn't humanity's first moral failure in God's story. It was the continuation of cosmic conflict. Examine the language of dominion in Genesis 1:28. God tells humanity to have dominion over fish and fowl. Dominion language appears again in Psalm 8, where the writer celebrates humanity's role, yet elsewhere dominion is contested. Satan claims authority over earthly kingdoms. In Matthew 4, Paul calls him the prince of air. If Satan had no claim before humans arrived, why does he possess authority afterward? The only explanation: Satan already held dominion before humans were created. Humanity's assignment wasn't establishing new order. It was reclaiming stolen authority from an usurper. This makes the garden narrative profoundly different. Adam and Eve aren't choosing between obedience and disobedience neutrally. They're choosing whether to trust God's authority over a being who already demonstrated cosmic rebellion. The test in Eden gains its weight from this context. Will humans align with God against ancient enemy, or will they listen to the voice of one already proven unfaithful? When Eve eats the fruit, she isn't merely disobeying a rule. She's siding with the serpent's authority over God's character. She accepts the serpent's version of reality, that God withholds and divine restriction isn't protection. This is why the fall has such cosmic consequences. Humanity doesn't just sin. They surrender their mandate of dominion to the very being God had already defeated. The serpent moves from tempting humanity to ruling through them. Consider what happens immediately after Adam and Eve hide. They cover themselves. They blame each other, and the serpent, the harmonious relationship with God, shatters instantly. But more significantly, their authority evaporates. They're expelled from Eden. They lose access to life's tree. They become subject to pain, toil, and death. All of this flows from yielding their dominion to Satan. Genesis 3:15 contains the first promise of redemption. God tells the serpent about enmity between seeds. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. This isn't simply a promise about human salvation, it's a cosmic warfare promise. There will be ongoing tension between God's line and Satan's line. Eventually, one seed will destroy serpent's head. The entire arc of Scripture becomes a reclamation project. God works to restore human dominion and defeat serpent's rule. Israel's battles aren't merely political, they're spiritual warfare. Plays the kings of Israel represent God's reclaiming authority. The prophets call people to covenant loyalty, while Satan works to corrupt that loyalty. When Jesus arrives, he doesn't come primarily as teacher. He comes as the one who will crush serpent's head. His temptation in the wilderness echoes Eve's temptation. Satan offers authority and power over all kingdoms. But Jesus refuses the serpent's offer. He remains aligned with God's dominion. He defeats Satan, not through combat, but through obedience, through reclaiming the authority humans surrendered. This reframes the crucifixion entirely. The cross isn't just about human sin, it's about cosmic victory. Christ defeats Satan's rule by submitting to the Father, by reversing humanity's choice in Eden. The resurrection proves it. Jesus rises as the second Adam who finally succeeded where first Adam failed. He reclaims dominion. He begins restoring creation. Now look at how Revelation circles back to Genesis. Revelation 12 describes war in heaven during end times. The dragon is cast down to earth, knowing his time is short. He pursues the woman and her offspring. This isn't new conflict, it's the final chapter of a war that began before humans existed. The serpent has ruled the earthly kingdoms for ages. But when Christ returns, Satan's dominion ends completely. He's cast into the abyss. A new creation emerges where God rules directly. This theological framework doesn't rest on speculation. It emerges from careful reading of Scripture's actual language, from patterns repeated across both testaments, from the logic of how divine redemption works. It suggests that God's first work in Genesis wasn't creation, but restoration. The chaos at beginning wasn't absence of matter. It was presence of disorder. The separation of light and darkness was cosmic combat. The creation of humanity wasn't introducing divinity's purpose to a blank slate. It was establishing new government on contested territory. Humanity's role was dominion, which means authority over an enemy already present. Satan's fall preceded Genesis 1. His rule preceded Eden. Temptation came to humans not as invasion, but as occupation by ancient enemy, seeking control. This changes how you understand your own struggles. When temptation arrives, you're not encountering something new. You're encountering the same ancient strategy, aimed at the same target, your choice to trust God. The question Genesis poses is your question too. Will you align your life with God's order or chaos? You inherit the same dominion mandate Adam received you, called to rule over the chaos within you. But that rule is only possible if you remain aligned with God's authority. The serpent still offers what he offered Eve: authority, knowledge, independence from divine restriction. He still frames God as the one withholding, controlling, limiting your potential. Your choice echoes Eve's. Whose authority will you trust? Whose version of reality will you accept? This matters because it reframes redemption. Salvation isn't escape from earth, it's reclamation of dominion. It's learning to rule as God intended, to exercise authority aligned with divine will. It's recognizing that Satan's defeat isn't a future event. It happened at the cross. You're living in the already not yet, where Satan's fall is certain but not yet complete. You possess authority he no longer holds, yet he still operates as if he rules. He still tempts as if dominion remains his claim. The Genesis narrative invites you to see beyond surface reading, to notice what's broken before humans arrive, to understand that evil isn't accidental, it's ancestral, ancient, and actively opposed to your calling. Eden wasn't Earth's beginning, it was Earth's middle. The real story began before time, in heaven's war. The real story continues through you, in your daily choice to align with God's dominion or the serpent's. You're not simply choosing between good and bad behavior, you're choosing which authority will rule your life, and through you which order will advance on earth. The serpent lost his case before you were born, but he still wages war for your agreement. He still fights for dominion through your choices. When you recognize this, temptation becomes different. It's not merely personal failure, it's participation in an ancient conflict. Your obedience isn't merely morality, it's spiritual reclamation. This is why Genesis matters. This is why the serpent appears in the garden. This is why Eve's choice carries cosmic weight. And this is why your choices do too.